What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Quisha King Show. I am your host, Quisha King, and the Quisha King Show is where we talk about faith, culture, and politics, all geared towards the next generation. Today, I have a very, very special guest, Adam B Coleman. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So, by day, I'm an IT guy. Uh, Not so much by night, but any other time, I'm an author. I'm also the founder of Wrong Speak Publishing. So, I'm trying different things, occasionally speaking, and trying to get my voice out.
Very good. How do you like the speaking? I just started doing that myself. How do you like it?
Um, I It's a rush. You know,
Okay.
it's like it's nerve wracking at first,
Mhm.
and then you build into it, and then it becomes a pretty decent rush, especially if you have a decent sized crowd.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. It's a little, do you get nervous every time you do it? I do.
Yeah, just at the beginning.
Mhm.
It's kind of like it's a nervousness, it's an excitement. It's a mixture of the two. But you know when you're doing it, and hopefully if you're speaking well and you get the crowd behind you,
Mhm.
then it can be a different experience. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to talk to you. You wrote a book called Black Victim to Black Victor.
Mhm.
And for those of you listening to this, I'm showing his book right now. But the cover of the book it looks like all black folks. Is that right? Is it all black folks?
I believe so. Yeah. Yeah.
And their hands are all together, like we're all in this together. And the subtitle is Identifying the Ideologies, Behavioral Patterns, and Cultural Norms that Encourage a Victimhood Complex. So, what about what about these ideologies create a complex?
Mostly from the basis of victimhood. Um,
Hmm.
so what ends up happening is there are legitimate issues, right? There are historical things that have happened targeting Black Americans. All these things are true, right? And so there is no denial of these things. There's no denial of
Right.
racism. There's no denial of hatred that exists. The difference is, even though those things are true, one, how prevalent are those things within our society today? And two, how much does that actually affect most Black Americans? So, I kind of dive into that. I dive into, the people who profit off of that particular message. You know,
Mm,
they have an incentive to keep a problem around, you
right.
know, and I have, while there are people who, might call me a grifter or something like that, um, you know, if the problem is fixed, my job goes away. And I have no problem with that because my message is we need to fix the problem.
Mm,
So when someone says that the problem is inevitable and the problem is invisible and systemic and all of these other buzzwords, um, then their incentive, or the likeliness, I should say, the likelihood of it being resolved is different.
mm,
um, Most of the last 9 chapters of the book are talking about realistic things that we can do on an individual level,
yeah.
right? I'm giving you the solutions as far as, in my perspective, what you can do to escape this mentality, have a more prosperous life, and see the world around you in a more clear way.
Yeah. So speaking of being a grifter, it feels like anytime you don't go along with the black way to think, the black narrative, the black fill in the blank,
Mhm.
you are called a grifter, you're called an Uncle Tom, you're called a coon, you're called, you know.
Yeah.
And what is so funny is that more recently, I see this is even happening on the more conservative side of things too. Like you find some people who if you don't go along with exactly what they think, then they still feel that you are somehow not being black enough. They don't quite say it that way, but that's how it feels. It feels like people are still, even when you break out of the progressive, Democrat, liberal, from the left, I guess,
Mhm.
somehow we still seem to find ourselves, some of us, back in the camp of not being Black enough, not, what it feels like? It feels like collectivism. It feels like you have to be this kind of Black conservative. You have to be this kind of Black person. It's okay. It's cool and all that you got away from the Democrat Party. It's cool. I'm glad you're not there anymore, but you're still not quite where I need you to be as a Black person.
Yeah.
Have you ever experienced that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I know what you're talking about. I think that race is a very difficult thing to kind of discuss, and race is everybody has their different view on race, even people within a particular race, and it's because we are all individuals. We
Right.
all have our different viewpoints. We may agree on 95% and differ on the 5%, right?
Yeah.
Me and you, if we were to get to talking, there may be something where you're like, I don't necessarily agree with that.
I'm sure that would
I'm
happen.
sure. So it's beyond I would say the race aspect. It's hard to have that particular conversation without people having like this particular viewpoint, and if you differ from it, that they think that you might be attacking or saying something from a bad faith state point of view.
Hmm.
And so that's why, like, you follow me on Twitter. I don't
Hmm.
really talk about race that much, and
Yeah.
I don't talk about it that much because we end up having these circular conversations that are pointless.
Yeah.
Just it, you know, I'll put it like this: I'm very observant, and I usually listen and I watch before I say anything.
Hmm.
And so I notice it's the same replies, it's the same insinuations, it's the same this, the same that, no matter who it is, right? If I can see how the sentence is starting, I pretty much know how the sentence is finishing,
Right.
right? It's very predictable.
Yeah.
And so what I try to do is have a nuanced view. So, I understand the conservative viewpoint where they have they don't want to dismiss race because there is a history revolving around race and there is a cultural
Absolutely.
aspect revolving around race. So I understand that,
Hmm.
and even though I am more of an individualist, right? Obviously, the book is called Black Victim, Black Victor. I'm acknowledging that Black as a race exists within our country. And
Right.
because of that, someone asked, is there Black culture?
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
so happy you brought this up. I was getting there.
So my reply is there Black culture? Yes, because people believe there's Black culture. So it
Hmm.
doesn't matter. I could say, no, there's no such thing as Black culture. Obviously, there are people who do. And so
Right.
you can build a culture around anything. There's video
Yeah.
game culture. There's all different
Sneaker
types of
culture.
sneaker culture.
Yeah.
You know, it, if that's what people find some sort of unification around, you can build a culture around anything. So if
Mm.
we have millions of people who believe in Black culture and believe in a sphere of what Black culture is and what it looks like, right? So be it. That's how they view it.
Yeah.
However, I have my view on what Black culture is
Hmm.
or how important it is. We all have our different viewpoints when it comes to there. I just think it's important that we all acknowledge that we all come from different areas. Oh, that's my dog. Uh, we all come from different areas, uh, different upbringings, and we see things differently. And so
Yeah.
I might disagree with someone, but I understand why they come up with certain conclusions. But my upbringing is different than other people. So, my viewpoint on Black culture or how relevant it is or how important it is different than other
Mm.
people. Um,
Where are you
so,
from, if I may ask?
so I tell people I'm from New Jersey, but I've lived in 5 states.
Okay.
I lived in 4 states before I was 18. And within those states, we moved around a lot as well. So, my upbringing is different.
Mm,
In the book I detail going in and out of homelessness,
mm.
um, and sorry, my dog here.
No, you're good.
She's has a little bit of anxiety. Um, we went in and out of homelessness a couple times as a kid,
Mm,
for different reasons. And as an adult, I was homeless for a short period of time. So, my viewpoint on race and people and all these different things, I've experienced good people and terrible people of every race, whatever, you name it.
right.
So my view on race and how important it is to hold on to that as the most important thing in my life is minimal, because I really just care about, are they good natured? Do they have
Mm,
good character? Um, I've never really talked about this publicly, but like the time I was homeless, as an adult, I moved to Tennessee, and um, I was supposed to stay with someone. It didn't work out, so it was basically I was going to sleep in my car until I had enough money to get my own place. Thankfully, when I moved to Tennessee, I literally had a job lined up.
mm.
The following Monday, I left my house on Friday. Following Monday, I had a job lined up. And my boss had asked me, "What's my situation?" And I was initially going to lie to him, but for whatever reason, I just told him the truth, not expecting anything from it. And my entire um, my entire management put together money to put me in a hotel room until I had enough to get my own apartment.
Wow, that is incredible.
Yeah. And so my boss, who's white, amongst other managers who are white and some who are black, but majority white,
Yeah,
they came out of their own pocket. I didn't ask for any of this.
right.
They came out of their own pocket to help me out, so I didn't have to sleep in my car.
Mm,
And the amazing thing is, like, they didn't ask for any money back. They just did it
wow.
out of the kindness of their heart.
Yeah.
And I loved working there, especially starting off in that foot. Like,
Mm.
anytime they wanted overtime, I was there.
Right. I mean, what better way to get the best out of your employee
Yeah.
by, just showing your heart and who they really are. That, I mean, that spoke to the culture of that company for sure.
Yeah.
Um, I've never spoken about this publicly myself, but I actually was homeless myself for a little bit. I'm from Connecticut. I grew up in Connecticut.
Okay.
My family moved from Florida when I was 13, and then I spent the rest of my time up in Connecticut. And then I lived in New York for a little bit, and I lived in Miami. But
Hmm.
I'm with you. Like, I have been helped, honestly, if I keep it all the way 100, I have been helped more, if not always, I've been helped more by white folks than I have by black. And that doesn't mean anything. That's no shade to black people,
Hmm.
but it would be crazy for me to pretend like all white people are bad and they need to do something with, their whiteness is just horrifying, and they need to, check their white privilege and all this foolishness. Because when I look back over my life, there were people that God sent to help me. He certainly wasn't checking to see what color they were. And
Yeah.
when you need help, who's checking? Who cares about what color somebody is when you are in need and somebody is opening up their heart to give you, God puts it on their heart to help you. And so I had a little right after the 2016 election. um I was pretty woke, I guess we would call it now. And
Hmm.
my little sister and we were having this conversation about Black Lives Matter. And sh she was like, "Well, I think they're cool and all, but, why don't they show up when it's black on black crime, because that's a problem." And I was like, "Well, all of these black men are being shot by the police and da 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 da." And I said, "I don't know, it was totally a God thing." I was like, "I'm going to go look up the numbers and see how many unarmed black men had been killed by the police as opposed to black on black crime,
Hmm.
or crime in black neighborhoods or whatever." And so I was really shocked because I couldn't understand why were there were so many black people marching in the street. And this is right after Ferguson. So, it's like all these Black people marching in the streets, and, it didn't make any sense to me why there was such an outcry for that and not an outcry for crime in the community. And so that prompted me to just start looking up some other statistics and things like that. And I came across Dr. Thomas Sowell. I know everybody's like, you gotta be baptized, and like, Thomas Sowell. But I think that's because it is something most of us have never heard before. You've never heard a Black man, talk like that and just spit these facts like that. I mean, I certainly never had. So listening to him, my mind was blown. I'm like, wait a minute, like this is crazy. So after that experience happened, I was sitting on my couch and just, chilling out and just thinking about all these things that I had learned, because I had found Dr. Walter Williams, Milton Friedman. And so I'm like, really, like my mind is just blown. So I'm sitting on the couch and just dealing with all of this. And God spoke to my heart and told me that my skin color had become an idol in my life. That was one of the most, if not the most, transformative moments in my entire life to this day. Because God let me know that it was an offense to him for me to put so much value in something that he never meant for me to have that much value in. And he began to drop these questions into my spirit, like, how do you on Sunday tell me that I'm the God of all, and that I can move mountains, and I can do all things through, you can do all things through Christ, and you can worship me, and I am all this, but Sunday through, Saturday through Monday, it's oppression, it's, all of this other, he was basically saying, you can't be hot or cold. I either am who I say I am, who you have claimed to say that I am, or I'm not. And certainly I am the God of, I've conquered racism too. And it was just such a download. It was so freeing. Adam, when I tell you, I felt like 10,000 pounds had been lifted off of my shoulders. I felt like I could finally see clear, because another thing that he revealed to me was that, in the Bible, it says a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. And how I was thinking was very double-minded. You can't have these two mindsets of you're more than a conqueror and then you're oppressed at the same time. They're in conflict. And so I was being double-minded, and it was hindering so many opportunities in my life, because when you walk in carrying that, people see it. You don't realize that people see it, but it is showing. You are putting off this vibe that says you're not competent. You're not, because you got all this stuff going on in your head. And when I was reading some of your book, you were talking about that victim mentality, and you can't believe you are a victim and a conqueror at the same time.
Right. Or was it the saying, you can't serve two masters?
There you go.
That kind of thing. So, I actually wrote an article once. It was titled, Are we Black first or Christian first?
Ooh, that sounds so dope. I want to read that. I did a YouTube video that talked about my experience, and basically talking about exactly what you just said. Because I'm sorry, go ahead. I don't want to.
No, it's okay. No, basically, I'm asking the question because I see a lot more people who I know are Christians. If you're not a Christian, then that's fine.
Right.
But I know people who are Christians who speak far more about their skin and their race than they do about their faith. Oh, sorry, my dog here.
You're good.
And so I want to ask the question, for these people who consider themselves, such Christians, how come you rarely talk about your faith in such a strong degree as you do when it comes to your race?
Yeah.
So
what was the response?
I mean, for the people who read it, they agreed with me. They said, you make a good point. Which is which. I'm not saying you can't. I'm asking the question.
Right.
So a lot of what I do, even throughout the book, I'm trying not to be very judgmental. I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to state how I feel. If
Mm-hmm.
you agree with it, then you don't, or if you agree with it, then you do. If you don't, you don't. It's fine. That's what freedom of speech is, and free to think however you want.
Right.
But but what I always try to do is ask pertinent questions and think a little bit outside the box.
Yeah.
Uh, there's a reason why I left the Democrats and became an independent,
Mm.
and I didn't automatically become a Republican. I might not never become a Republican,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fine. It's because I wanted to lean on my principles, my thought, how I saw the world, what made sense, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously there's no purity in either party, right?
Of course.
So my viewpoint is one side is definitely crazier than the other, at least from my viewpoint. When we're
Mm-hmm.
denying biology and they're, so we don't have to go down that path, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, we can go there. We
but
can totally go there. I go there all the time.
but
Yeah.
but for me, as long as I am being principled, then that's all I really care about.
Mm.
So if for me to be principled means that I disagree with Republicans, then so be it. I talked about today. I don't like when parents use their children for political rallies and protests and stuff like that.
Mm.
Let kids be kids.
Right.
And someone showed something like Black Lives Matter with this little kid walking and yelling, chanting in the fist, and I
Yeah.
said, yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. But to
Mm-hmm.
be fair, I don't like it when parents bring their kids to Trump rallies either,
Mm.
right? I think that there should be a level of separation for children from politics, and there should be age appropriate conversations that oh, I'm sorry, my dog here. She's like, there should be age appropriate conversations that people have with their kids. It doesn't mean that they turn 18 then you start talking to them about politics. Obviously, I have conversations with my son about culture and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I always put it in a frame of, here's what I think, check this out, you tell me,
Yeah.
giving him information for him to decide for himself.
Yeah.
So I think that's the best approach when it comes to kids. Otherwise, it really comes off as, indoctrinating and, placing your political thought, which isn't necessarily your values. I think there's a mixture of the two. You can have a political thought as far as, economics.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that's your values. You're just going
Yeah.
based off of what you think works.
Yeah, I do. That's why I more so call myself a conservative, because to me that speaks more to the value
Mhm.
side. I don't really refer to myself as a Republican. I mean, I am a registered Republican, but I
Mhm.
don't really refer because when I talk about these things, I'm talking about from the value perspective. The party is just, I don't know, like a club basically.
Yeah.
To me, and sometimes they behave that way, like the values, but the values are supposed to be held within the club. But I think they need some lessons on that. But anyway, that's another topic for another day. but but yeah, my children are 15 and 13, so they're now more so, I mean, because they're asking more questions now. They are, especially my oldest daughter. My youngest daughter is a special needs child, so she's like, she could care less. But my oldest daughter, she is a little bit more curious about things that are happening in the world. She sees things that pop up on, social media and stuff like that, and so she is curious. And I guess this might be one of the things that we differ on. I think that if anybody's going to indoctrinate my kid, it's going to be me, because I want to instill my values into my children. I want to instill the things that I believe into my kids. Like, I do that on purpose. I purposely instill in them values, certain, especially biblical values. I purposely instill biblical values and have been instilling these values in them since the day that they were born. But you know what? Probably even before they were born, because I would pray over my children when they were in utero. So certainly doing, I was certainly indoctrinating my own kid, but if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be me, and not, like a school system or something, which I certainly have a problem with,
Yeah.
whichever side you lie on. I don't want politics to be brought to my kid in the classroom. I don't care if it's Republican or Democrat or independent. I don't want these blanket statements. I'm all for, older children having the debate, but yeah, I don't want my kid to be indoctrinated in school.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between kids learning information while in school and then being taught values in school, right? Unless you bring your kid to like a private institution like a Catholic school, you purposely know that they're installing Catholic values and stuff like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
But for a public school, I remember someone had put up a picture where they basically, within the school, they put up an image of like a Satan-like figure that someone had drawn. No, someone put up a Satan-like image on the wall, and someone was like, I don't think that's as big of a deal. That doesn't scare me. And I said, would you feel that way if it was Jesus on the wall? And they're
Right.
like, good point. I was
Right.
like, it doesn't belong in public school.
Exactly. Someone just tweeted yesterday, I think it was. They were like, all information is good information. All knowledge is good knowledge and should be taught to kids. And I quote tweeted her, and I was like, I bet you she wouldn't say this if I was trying to teach the Bible to her kids. And she's like, religion has no place in schools. I'm like, you can't make this stuff up. I knew you would say that. It's people don't. It's like some people crumble under the weight of their own stupidity.
Yeah.
It's like that kind of thinking, when you start doing these, saying these absolutes, all information should be taught and there's none that should not, it's like, okay, well, I bet you wouldn't say that if whatever.
Yeah. And that's the battle for me, is just being principled, right? Not falling into the tribe and trying to whatever. That's why, like, for the most part, I get along with just about everybody, even though there are certain people I disagree with on certain things.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly fine. Throughout the book, and actually one of the solutions is trying to find commonality with other people. Whether it's race or politics or country of origin.
Yeah.
It's okay. She is really I know. You want to find some sort of commonality between people.
Right.
And the same thing goes for, political ideology.
Yeah.
So if I agree with you on 90%, why do I care about the 10% so much?
Yeah. Unless that 10% is something that really, really, really sticks in. Like there is something like, okay, I cannot make the leap of saying that a biological man is actually a woman or that a biological woman is actually a man. I'm sorry, I can't make that leap. Now we might be able to agree on some other things, but if you want me to be on policy with you, if you want me to side with selling this to kids, exposing children to me, it's like it's like living in an alternative world or something. Like, to me, you want me to believe something that I know to not be true, and then demonize me for not believing that thing. It's like, I don't know, some of this stuff, some of the things are too important for me to not find common ground. You know what I mean? Like some things are just too because when you start, that is, to me, that is a very dangerous idea. We're telling the whole generation of children, it's okay. You can just say whatever you want to say. You can just say words and the words have absolutely no meaning, and you can just apply them like this postmodern, thinking this, blue is not really blue, a table is, it's just like whatever you want, whatever you feel it is, that's what it is. And I don't know, I mean, I can rock with some people, I can go with you on, I'm a pretty minded person, like I can go there, but it's just some things I'm like, not gonna be able to get me on that one. Like, and then I have to separate myself from some of these ideas because they're becoming so ingrained into society and in culture that it becomes more important for me to not stand with that than to be silent about it, because it is so dangerous. Is that wrong? Am I wrong for that?
Well, when I say finding commonality, I mean more so on an individual basis,
Okay.
and also you want to find commonality with people who are going to show good faith back, right?
True.
So you
True.
don't want it to be a one-way street. So that's why, like, I don't argue with people because it's a waste of time. I don't try to convince anybody. I don't try to convert anyone.
Yeah.
Even in the introduction of my book, I said I'm not trying to convert you to think how I think.
Yes,
You
I
know,
read that.
so I do that purposely because I want people to think for themselves.
Yeah.
If you've never heard this perspective, and even people who generally agree with me, I say some things that they never really considered.
Yeah.
And but it's for consideration. It's free speech. Sorry, she's
Yeah. It is free
uh,
speech. And I
but
love to hear that.
I'll also, yeah, I would say more so on an individual level.
Mhm.
When it comes to our children, when it comes to protecting them from certain things, for me, it's while there may be an ideology that I just adamantly disagree with, I wouldn't lobby for universities to get rid of it. If that's what they want to do and
Mhm.
that's what their kids are paying to go there for,
Mm.
then fine, right? We can complain about how, they run off people who differ.
Yeah.
We can talk about those things, till we're blue in the face. But I think it's very different when we talk about our children under the age of 18 being given this information, not even given, being forced this information, forced
Right.
this dialogue, forced talking about sexuality,
Yeah.
all of these different things that from when I was in school, and I'm not that old, but when I was in school, we didn't have, we obviously we had, health class where we talked about sex, but we
Yeah.
didn't go to this particular degree.
Mm.
And I find something really disturbing when it comes to, like talking about sexuality for children.
Mm.
I think there's something, James Lindsay is always talking about how it's very grooming,
Oh,
right?
yes. I had him on my show. He
Yeah.
was, oh man, that's my homeboy. Like I love him. He is, first of all, he's super smart and he dives totally into these types of things. I'm sorry, go ahead. Didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine. I had the privilege of meeting him twice actually.
Mm.
So, he's definitely someone who hones in on the grooming aspect.
Yeah, he gets it.
Yeah, it's a very inappropriate thing to say, LGBT, elementary students. It's like, what?
Right. I'm sorry,
Like,
what'd you say?
yeah, because that implies like sexuality. You know, it's a very weird kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
So
And we would never accept, well, if I don't know, 2 seconds ago in America, we would never accept this. We would never accept um for like a 40-year-old man to be coming in and talking about, you know, his fantasies with a 12-year-old child. That wouldn't be okay. Literally 2 seconds ago. And I mean, things are changing so fast now. We have minor attracted persons. So imagine where that's going. But just as inappropriate as it is for, and I'm not equating gay people to pedophiles, because I don't believe that just because you're gay that means you're a pedophile. That is a stupid idea. I don't believe that. But what I'm saying is that I wouldn't want a heterosexual person coming in talking about sexual there is an inappropriate way to talk about heterosexual sex with children too. You know, where they have taken sex ed is way beyond what anybody, well, what most of us had probably thought about when we were talking about sex ed. Now, there are some people, you ever heard of this guy, Alfred Kinsey?
No, he doesn't sound familiar.
Whew, this guy was a real sicko. He was a pedophile, a sadomasochist, bisexual person, man, who performed these experiments on babies. When I say babies, I'm talking about babies as young as 2 months old, where he was doing sexual acts with children. His work was, once he wrote, I forget the name of the book that he wrote, but he published this book. And many of this comprehensive sex education stuff comes from his work. Like, this is the person that that our school system, the experts, are bringing in to give validity to these comprehensive sex education teachings, programs in K through 12 schools. It is, you wouldn't believe like the experts that, you know, have these PhDs. When you read the papers and where they think that sex education should go, they literally say that the boundary between adults and children should be erased. Like, these people are sick. And this is what, when parents are screaming at the top of their lungs, flailing, you know, about critical race theory, queer theory, and all of these things, and the pornography that's in schools that we're finding, we have legitimate concerns. Like, this is not like, this is not white people, this is not Black people. These are just parents of all Republicans, liberal parents that are looking at what's coming home in the book bag and being like, oh, hell no. Absolutely not.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, you know, this particular issue has been one of the biggest issues that have really red pilled a lot of, you know, let's say normies, like apolitical people.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, during the pandemic, now all of a sudden parents are looking at like, what are they teaching these kids? What's going on here?
Yeah.
And so that woke them up. But I think what even more so that woke them up was the gaslighting, right? That's been one of the most upsetting things about the whole critical race theory and gender ideology. When parents are like, I literally have this here. And they're like, you watch Fox News too much.
Right.
And it's like, you know, for someone like myself, you know, I went out to Wisconsin and I met parents. That's when I met James Lindsay. I'm talking to parents. I talked to parents since. They sent me, like, I was in a group chat. They're sending me what they're dealing with, all the books that are in their schools, what they're telling their kids.
Yeah.
You know, they're sending them the homework. I'm looking at it.
Right.
Like, this is it. And then I turn around and then they say, these are a bunch of white supremacists, racists. They don't want to talk about history.
Right.
Not a single person. That's why I said, like, and I was guilty of it at one point. You know, a lot of people who are on the left never hear a right perspective unless it comes from someone on the left, right? So when you're watching Rachel Maddow talk to you about what the right is saying, you're getting a filter from Rachel Maddow. But when you talk to the average person, the average conservative, they say, yeah, you should talk about history.
Right.
You should, and they would have a problem if someone was trying to sugarcoat history, right? And if there are people who are actually trying to do that, we wouldn't like it.
Right.
You know, that is a mutual point in understanding. But there's this sorry, it's okay.
No, you're good.
Okay. There's this gaslighting. There's just saying, that it's not really there. Or
Right.
my other annoyance, and I saw when you're on Dr. Phil, the saying that critical race theory is not being taught in schools. But then on the flip side, they say, well, we are teaching these things. And like, yes, that's what we're talking about.
Right. Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's a level of gaslighting. Like, you're not seeing what you're actually seeing.
Right. That is probably one. I mean, it's the biggest argument that I get hit with, but it's also the most annoying because at this point, you have either got to be blind, deaf, dumb, or stupid to not believe that critical race theory isn't being taught. And I always feel like I have to say, I'm not saying that children are being given Richard Delgado's critical race theory book. That's not what parents mean when we say that critical race theory is being taught. No, they're not learning, critical race theory from Richard Delgado. No teacher's like, okay, boys and girls, open up your critical race theory book. No, of course not. Nobody believes that. And nobody is saying that. What we are saying, though, is that a K through 12 version, a dumbed down, if you want to call it, a more simplified version of critical race theory tenets are certainly being taught. And it's like, this. I don't know why would we even want to push that on children? Like, what, excuse me, what would be the point of even trying to divide us like that? It made me think about that when you were saying finding that common ground. There is nothing about critical race theory that would lead children to finding a commonality with another child, because you are telling them, I have to look at your race before I can engage with you on anything, and I have to judge what your thoughts and where your heart is before I can build a relationship with you. Because if you're white, you already have some privilege, some systemic, something that you done benefited from, some whiteness that you step in and clothe yourself in every day. You there's like all these things that the child has to like first check off before they can even get to know you as a human being. So I am really confused on why the argument pivots to this, oh, it's just history, when it's like, no, do you realize what we're actually doing to our children? It's very frustrating.
Yeah, and I think that this argument, it's a completely bad faith argument. I just like I watched the Dr. Phil show where you're on,
Mm,
and the guy he's coming from a completely bad faith standpoint, and
yeah.
he's making it sound like you're crazy, right?
Oh, yeah.
This isn't actually happening. But then on the flip side, they're saying that what they're describing is what you're describing. It's
Yeah.
actually happening,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like saying, you're wearing sneakers on your feet. Well, actually, these aren't sneakers. It's like, well, you know what I'm saying.
Right. They're actually tennis shoes. Thank you
Right, they're
very
actually
much.
tennis shoes.
Yeah.
It's like, stop it.
See, you're just such a liar. You're such a
Right.
liar. You said that they were sneakers and they're actually tennis shoes.
Right, exactly.
Duh, duh. It's
And so,
ridiculous.
it's that constant, like, that's why for me it's an annoyance. That's why I don't mostly talk to these particular people, because it goes nowhere.
Right.
You're talking to someone who's on the extreme level of a particular ideology,
Yeah.
and they might say, well, you are too. I'm like, no, I say I'm wrong all the time.
Me
They're
too.
like, oh, you make a good point. Like, people who are extreme in their ideologies don't say, oh, you make a good point.
Right. Exactly.
Um,
That's funny. Yeah, I do that. I don't mind constructive criticism. I welcome it. I want to be better. I want to do better. I want to I want to challenge my own thoughts. It was challenging my own thoughts in the first place that even got me to this breakthrough that I so desperately needed. Not for any political reasons, but I feel like for my soul. Like, God was not pleased with where I was, and I needed that. I mean, the way the way he did it was a little unconventional, but nonetheless I got to where I needed to be. But I want to challenge my own thoughts. Like, I don't want to be wrong and just bumping along and you just as wrong as, two left shoes. I don't want to do that. So I welcome constructive criticism, but like you said, a lot of these people that talk that oh, you're just against teaching history, you're right. They're not arguing in good faith. They're not. You can't be, because everybody, like parents across the country, have seen this stuff, coming up. Or then they try to go into, like, when I was talking about the queer theory stuff, and have you seen that book that's going, one book in particular, it's called Gender Queer, I think it's called, and there's actual porn in the book, and it's in K through 12 libraries across the country. And some lady was like, well, if my kid ever showed me this, I would just laugh and, like, basically just turn the page and, like, could you imagine, you don't remember the things that you were doing? Like, I'm like, well, first of all, I wasn't doing that, ma'am. And second of all, if my child was bringing this home, that wouldn't be funny to me. Like, but these are the adults. This is an adult woman who is telling me that it's no big deal, girl. Kids talk about all kind of crazy stuff all day long, and you should. I mean, this is just what they do. Why are you making it such a big deal?
Yeah, and that's a ideological parent. What they're trying to do is bend it every which way possible to say that this is okay, right? You could legitimize anything. Oh,
that's true.
I'm sorry.
No, you can legitimize anything. You can rationalize anything. You can justify anything. The human mind is quite fascinating. If you you can make yourself believe that you are a woman if you are a biological man. The human mind, boy, will play some tricks on you.
Yeah, exactly. And also, you can rationalize how you are a victim, even though you're one of the top 1% earners in the world. But
that talk, Adam. For real, that's true. I mean, Oprah Winfrey has said out of her own mouth that a homeless white guy has more privilege than she do. Now, now, ma'am. Now, I'm gonna need you to, like, go take a look at your bank account, and I'm gonna need you to stand in front of a homeless white person and tell them that you have more privilege than I mean, how do you get there? I don't even understand. Oprah is not stupid, but how does one make that? How do you open your mouth to say some stupid stuff like that? That's crazy to me.
Well, that's why it's hard to figure out if this is ideological or if this is an economical move, right? It's a trendy economical thing, right? Especially someone like Oprah, she was the queen of white women for her entire career, right?
Hello.
And then now all of a sudden they need to apologize to her. Like, something about it doesn't smell right. There are certain people who I legitimately think that they're ideologically driven, right? I don't doubt that Kendi actually believes what he's saying, right?
Yeah.
But I have questions about certain people who are just either they're going along with a trend. It's like this new thing, especially because if you legitimately think that there's a crisis going on, like you said, of Black people being killed by the police, then you're looking for some sort of solution. And so the anti-racist solution was waiting, to sneak in. It was always going on. That's why you're seeing the proliferation of the DEI industry. I was doing a little bit of research on DEI, and I don't think people realize how much it grew. It grew 123% in a matter of months in 2020.
Ooh,
like
wow.
The industry just exploded. Now they have diversity officers.
That's one hell of a grift.
Yeah. Now they have DEI officers, so executive level diversity officers.
Yeah.
And they make well over the average salaries in America is about 150 grand.
Oh yes.
Or 140.
Yeah. And this is a kicker. I think it was the McKinsey study that kicked this all off. Did you see that? Do you know? Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
I don't, not that particular study, no.
So I forget what year, but years ago there was this. I think it was put on. It was the the McKinsey Consulting Group. So
Yeah.
they put out this study that kicked a lot of this stuff off, but it didn't take off, like you said, until 2020. When we were having these, you would see more of these diversity, equity, and inclusion people popping up. But the study, if you read it, what they, how in statistics they have that thing, it's like if it's less than like 5%, whatever, then it's like it's the statistical category is like it's not affecting anything, basically. I forget how it, do you know what I'm talking about though?
No, I know what you're talking about. It's
Okay.
like a statistical improbability or something
Yeah,
like that.
it's like,
Yeah.
so all of these studies that they ran, they had like no statistical impact. Like none of the things that, like the amount of race that people racism that people, this unbiased that people were experiencing or all of these things that kicked off this whole movement, basically none of them had any statistical impact. So the study blew up, but nobody bothered to dig and look and see. Like it was like a bunch of nonsense. I'm like, this is a grip for real.
Yeah, and then because I'm actually, I don't know if you saw me tweet about it, but I started working on my second book, and so
I think so. Yeah.
I'm talking a little bit about. I don't want to give too much away, but ultimately the book is about saviorism. But there is a chapter where I'm talking about the DEI industry.
Yeah.
And I guess ultimately, I think people should understand that, like you said, there's a study where it shows minimal impact, if any.
Mm-hmm.
I think people look at corporations doing certain things as like if Amazon, for example, pledged $10 million for diversity, whatever.
Right.
You name whatever. They gave $10 million, right? It's a show. It's a theater.
Yeah.
They're showing, especially at that particular time when there was a lot of pressure on a ton of people to do a bunch of things.
Yeah.
There was rising tensions in the country. And on top of that, there was a negative viewpoint on corporations in general because they force small businesses to shut down while the big corporations stayed open, right?
Yes.
So any chance that they can look better, they'll do. But then on the other end, with the rising racial tensions, corporations are very short-term minded because they think, what's the next thing? What's the next thing?
Yeah.
They're a lot of times they're very short-term and they're very reactionary. So if they see that there's rising racial tensions and they see that what happens if this spills into our corporation, then we have a liability issue, which is why you see DEI taking off, which is why you see training taking off, unconscious bias training. When you see literally whole departments, they've actually made a DEI and a lot of corporations its own department. It's not attached to human resources.
Right.
So you have these people who are basically, their job revolves around changing policy. Their job revolves around finding issues, which issues can be discrepancies, right? So if I'm in a company and I see that, Black employees make 2% less than white employees, then that must be an issue that we need to address. We need to have the same, right? But it's not an indicator of racial bias. Right. It's not an indicator of anything. It could be an indicator of a ton of different things.
Yeah.
What if these Black employees started years before on average than the white employees? You have inflation, you have the market change, you have all these different things. They're getting paid a lower pay rate than someone who came in who was newer. I'm just making this up. I'm giving just different examples. And that's where that's the part where people don't really understand is that the DEI industry is much for liability, right? It's about reputation and liability. So if I'm an employee and I say I was treated unfairly and I want to sue them, they say, listen, we're not as liable because we did everything that we possibly could to address any sort of environmental issues, right? So people might sue a company and say, it's the corporate environment, right?
Right.
But if I have a DEI department and we give routine trainings, you can't use that excuse on us.
Hey, we're doing what we're supposed. We checked the box.
We check the box.
We checked the box, and we got the extra insurance to cover it too. So don't be don't be sniffing around for any extra cash.
Yeah. But see, here's the flip side to it is that you have, see, a lot of these DEI people, they're no different than the anti-racist. They have the same mindset. They have the same objective, right?
Oh yeah.
Their idea of diversity is essentially anybody but a straight white male, right? So the flaw is that you can't say that you include everyone if you're excluding someone. And so this is not me coming to a defense of white people because I love white people so much. This is talking about
principle. You're going to
principle.
say that though, you know that, right?
I really don't care. That's the great part. But it's the principle, right? If it's wrong to treat me differently because of my skin color, it's wrong to treat them differently because of their skin color.
This is very simple to me.
It's very simple.
This is civil rights 101.
Right. So there's actually, I don't know if you heard about this. There was a situation with, I'm going to mess up the company. I think it's like Novo Medical or something like that.
Okay.
Basically, there is a white executive during a 2018 diversity initiative. They fired him. He's an executive.
Oh, yes. I did hear about that.
Yeah. They fired him, put 2 people in his spot.
Yep.
And then he sued them. And he won for $10 million.
Something like $10 million, I think it was.
Yep.
I'm like, so, yeah, I am
for discrimination
because we need to shut this mess down. Just like you said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Like if you don't want somebody doing that to you, then why are you doing this to these white people who ain't never owned you? These people talking about, it's because of slavery and it's because of Jim Crow, and it's okay. Listen. None of that is going to heal. To me, it's an insult because there is no way that telling someone that they're constantly yelling at somebody that they're a racist or making them lose their job or all of these types of things, that is not going to, it's not going to give, it's not going to make what happened in slavery any less bad than what it was, and it's like, how dare you try to, make this seem like this is going to compensate for what happened to those people in slavery. It won't. Or during Jim Crow. It will not. And that is it is insulting that you're going to hang on the banner of slavery and Jim Crow and talk, make this person lose their job because they happen to be white. It's like, you know what? No, you can't do that. You don't get to do that. You don't. But my great-great-grandfather was born a slave, and he bought his freedom, and he taught himself how to read and acquired almost 400 acres of land that my family still lives on today. And he had to deal with it. I can't even imagine what he had to deal with. I cannot even imagine. And for anybody to try to hang on to that and try to say, okay, well, we're gonna make this person lose their job when they aren't racist. They're not doing the thing that people are trying to make them out to be, but they're simply born white, is just, it's infuriating to me. I'd like to ask you, as we wrap up here, I'd like to ask you, what are some other solutions that you have in the book that you can help the people, Adam? Help us, heal us. What we gonna do?
The number one is reunify the Black family.
Ooh, I gotta have you on again. This wasn't long enough. We gotta talk again because we didn't even get. That's a whole show right there. My gosh. Okay, reunifying the Black family. That is, I'm with you 100%.
as much as the book is, talking about Black victims and stuff like that, but most of the book is talking about family, and it's talking about the relationship between parents and their children. Those are the bulkiest chapters that I have.
Mm,
And it's extremely important. That's where I talk about my childhood and my upbringing and not
mm,
growing up with my father and the impact it had on me. Right. And I'm not even the worst of the people who experience what I went
yeah.
through. So, I want to, and this one thing I'll say about conservatives, conservatives have been saying this, but I think part of the problem has been they say, the Black family, that's the number one issue. And they just stop right there because it's supposed to be self-evident. And I think that when they stop right there, it gets used against them to say, you're just jabbing at the Black community, or that's just
Mhm.
a talking point.
Well, we kind of had to stop and get back to what we were talking about, but we ended talking about fatherhood and family and fatherlessness. Can we say that fatherlessness?
Yeah, that's the term that I
Um,
use.
what you were telling me, I believe you were telling me that your own father, you had some issues there. Is that right? Do I remember that right?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
So I'll let you tell it. Tell us what happened and what made you want to talk about that.
um, I saw a lot of parallels between my particular situation growing up and the real issues that were happening for many Black Americans, um, and the role of the father, and missing that figure within the household and how it affects people.
Mhm.
So I was using my particular story as a story um, to illustrate how detrimental it could be. And while my story isn't the most extreme, obviously there are people who end up in jail or dead, and things like that.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of different scenarios that happened when I was a kid,
Mhm.
and even as an adult. Just the struggles from being behind other people who do have a healthy, secure two-parent home.
Mm.
So it's one of those things where I wanted to use my story to make a point, and I think I was able to convey that message.
But Adam, when you talk about these things, you get a lot of pushback from Black folks that say, "Oh, what are you talking about? There aren't all these single Black mothers. Black fathers are very involved. They are, they're not all these homes without Black homes without fathers. You can't say that. That's talking down about Black people. Like you can't talk about that. You are talking down against your people. You are painting Black men in this way that is just not true. That is just a lot of times, you hear that's a conservative talking point.
Hmm.
That's just pushing a right-wing narrative. I'm trying to think of all the things that I've heard
Yeah.
when you talk about these facts. um what do you say to that?
Well, it's interesting that you said, you paint Black fathers in a particular way. Actually, for people who go and read my book, I'm equal opportunity.
Mhm.
I'm critical of my mother and her decision,
Mm.
because my father was married, just not to my mother. And
Oh.
and that's how I was conceived. Now, obviously, I, that particular relationship wouldn't have resulted in the household that I'm describing that
Mhm.
we should have.
Mhm.
So these were purposeful decisions that were made.
Mhm.
And so I am questioning why my mother made this particular decision. And I'm also questioning the mentality behind a lot of women, Black women specifically, when it comes to family planning. And, there's a particular chapter called Feminism and Fatherhood,
Mhm.
where I'm talking about how a lot of Black women's, uh, whether they see themselves as it or their behavior, because I'm into behavior, I'm watching their behavior, and they behave as feminists. And
you can't say that, Adam. You can't say that either. You can't talk about Black fathers, okay? And you certainly cannot talk about Black mothers if it's in a negative way. The only thing that you can say about a Black woman, a Black
Mhm.
mother, is that she is a goddess, a queen, everything that she touches and does is sprinkled with fairy dust, and she does no wrong. You cannot say anything bad about a Black woman.
Well, obviously I don't believe in that.
I'm
I
just telling you what
Yeah.
I hear. I'm just, that's what I
No,
hear.
I hear it too, and I think it's ridiculous. I think literally anybody is up for criticism.
Yeah.
Obviously there are people who are more taboo than others, but
Mhm.
if you have a legit reasoning, and I think the way I wrote the book is coming from a place of concern and compassion. So I think most people understand the criticisms that I'm making. It's
Mhm.
not being, bombastic or wagging my finger at Black
Mhm.
women. It's asking a particular question or multiple questions about their viewpoint on family, and why they think this way, and the effects of feminism. And I'm making more of the case that even if Black women don't see themselves as feminists, they behave like feminists, right?
Mm.
You know,
Yep.
so the I don't need a man. The
I can do bad all by myself.
I can do bad by myself.
I'm a strong, independent Black woman.
Right. And that key word is independence, right? When you have independence in mind, then there is no togetherness with someone else.
That's right.
There's no sacrifice. There's no anything.
There's no
And,
marriage. You cannot have a marriage if you are independent. You
right.
have to have interdependence.
Right.
You cannot, and this is something I had to learn. So after I was divorced, you kind of have this time, well, you should at least, where you reflect and you look at the things that you did wrong. And everybody, it's so easy to put everything on the other person.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're mature, um, you look at the things that you did wrong. And I really wanted to, I'm a thinker. Like, I probably think too much sometimes. I'm in my head a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted to understand why I did behavior. I'm interested even in my own behavior, like why I do the things that I do. Even with myself, it's other people too. But I was curious on why I behaved the way I behaved, and I had this moment when I was married where we were having this fierce fellowship. And he looked at me and was just like, it just wasn't pleasant, and it stopped me in my tracks. And I was like, because he'd always looked at me with, like, admiration and love and these things. And um I was right in what I was saying in the moment. Like, I was right from the argument that, from my perspective of what the problem was. But God arrested me in that moment to show me myself, to show how I was wrong in my approach. And
Mm-hmm.
that moment changed a lot, because God took me down this path to make me understand men. And my approach to him was never going to get what I desired from him. Growing up, I was heard, my parents were married. They were married for 20 years. But my father was away a lot for work. And so my mother did instill us with that. She didn't quite say it like, you don't need a man. But what she used to say a lot was, if you don't have one, I want to show you all the things. I want to show you how to do everything by yourself. She was preparing us to be alone.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a lot of the strong Black woman talk. It was a lot of liberal feminist talk and behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I started to look to the Bible, and look at the order and look at what God had said about marriage and how women should behave in order to have a good marriage union, God is explicit. He says, husbands, love your wives. Wives, respect your husbands. Two totally different commands.
Mm-hmm.
And once I started to dig deep into that and the respect that a man needs, not wants, not might need to have from time to time, what he needs, the respect that he needs, just like women need love and affection.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that men don't need those things, but it is a deep need for us to have them. It is a deep need for men to have respect. And I had to understand that need came from how he was wired as a man, how he was made by God. And that started to, I started listening to reading different things on successful marriages and things like that. Unfortunately, my marriage didn't end up working out, but what I learned was gold, because it put me in the right mindset to hopefully be married again one day, and to know how to approach this marriage in the right mindset as a woman, because you cannot be independent and be in a marriage. You have to respect your husband. There are so many things that women have to do. We think we want our men to respond in the way that we would respond, but the way we respond is coming from a female mindset. And if he responded that way, we wouldn't even be attracted to him, because he probably wouldn't even be attracted to us.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like
Exactly.
we're expecting him to have these feminine behaviors, and when he doesn't respond, when he is coming in all of his manhood, it's like we don't know how to respond. And it's like, because many a times we don't have our fathers there, so we don't see how real men behave. And we see a bunch of women and we're like, well, why did he say that to me? He didn't turn around and say, like in the soap operas, and give like this dramatic response. And we're like looking for all of that foolishness that's not reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so we live in this place that's not real, and expecting him to respond, to behave like women, or like something we see on TV that it does not exist.
Right.
And
Right.
so it really took me down this journey of how to I had to get myself together, because I was so out of order. I was so out of pocket. And talking about that, it is taboo, but so many Black women need to hear it. And not only Black women, I see a lot of other cultures starting to adopt this mindset too. And
Yes.
it's destroying their families the same way, because it doesn't matter the color. That behavior is destructive, whoever's doing it.
Exactly. That's why I was saying before, like, my book it's using Black people almost like a case study, right? So there are certain things that are kind of specific to us, but there are other things that are general principles. And so, like you said, the feminist mindset, it doesn't matter who adapts to it, but if you hold on to it, usually doesn't result into really good outcomes. But you mentioned not having a father around to really see how men actually behave and what they respond to.
Yeah.
Think of it from the other way around. Imagine being a boy, being surrounded by women, and you don't have a man to see how he behaves and what he looks like. Have you ever noticed, and I'm going to say some real taboo stuff right now.
Oh, I'm here for it. Let's do it. Let's go there.
Have you ever noticed how some men really love shopping these days? Straight men.
Yes, actually, yes. And they talk a lot about it too. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's even in the rap songs. Yes. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Shoe collection. All right. So and this might be like an extreme example, but let's say like he's, a big rapper or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. Highly materialistic. Right. Loves buying shoes. Right. all about showing off, right?
Ooh, I see where you're
High,
going.
highly emotional, very sensitive. What are half of their songs
Ooh.
about? The haters. Why do you care if people don't like? It's these are very feminine men.
Ooh, talk that talk, Adam. You know what is so funny that you say that, because I'm a big hip hop fan. And
Hmm.
I remember back in the day when Jay-Z, he had this line, I don't even remember the song, but he was like, my Louis slippers. And I was like, ew, that just like, I did not appreciate that. Like, every time he said it, like every time I heard it, it would make me, like, it would just make my skin crawl. It just because it sounded like a punk. You sound like a punk. Like,
Hmm.
there was nothing masculine about it. My Louis slippers. I was like, like
Yeah,
it was such a turn off. Like, I know exactly what you're talking about, but I never thought about it like that.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
That's like, yeah.
And then in the book, it's not my concept; it's a concept that's out there. But in some ways, I fit into that a little bit when I was
Mhm.
growing up. But you have the phenomenon of the son husband.
The
Have you
son
ever heard that?
husband. Oh, I think I don't I've never heard it put that way, but I think I know what you're saying. Where the
Yeah,
son, well, I'll let you explain it.
yeah. Basically, let's say you have a single mother, has one or two kids. She's unsuccessful in relationships,
Mhm.
and she's willing to forego them because one, she likes her independence.
Mhm.
She likes being able to do whatever she wants. But women love compassion.
Mhm.
They want that the male attention, right?
Oh yeah.
But a son husband, she's able to get the male attention without the sacrifice of anything, right?
Ooh.
And
Wow. Yeah, she's putting this burden on her son that does not belong to him. So
right,
she's expect that can make for some weird, like, Sigmund, what is it? Who was that guy? Sigmund Freud?
yeah, Sigmund Freud, yeah,
Yeah, like some weird parent child yada yada. Like, because that's gonna really screw up the mind of a boy. Where, I mean, obviously I'm not a boy, but to me, when I think about this, I could see him liking the role of the
hmm
protective provider, because that's
hmm
natural. But then at the same time, not when he gets to a certain age, it's going to be confusing for him, because he's going to want to do that, and going to want some of that other stuff that comes along when he does that.
Well, that's the thing with the son husband role. It's the best of both worlds for a woman, right? Because in a relationship, there's the sexual obligation, right?
Mhm.
There's the sacrifice. There's the
Mhm.
a lot of women see a relationship as a power dynamic, right? Even though it's not necessarily that.
Yeah.
So with the son husband, you have none of that. You have no sexual obligation. There is no real power dynamic on an equal footing. You're always above him. So you can dictate and you can leverage his emotions, and he's automatically going to look up towards you, right?
Mm.
So I'll give you a perfect example. The NBA draft, number one pick. What are
Yep.
you going to do with that first check? What do they all say?
I'm gonna buy my mama a house.
Right. Look at Kevin Durant. Kevin
Mhm.
Durant wins, and he says, "This goes to my mama." Right? Kisses her on the lips. I don't know if you noticed that.
I did
Uh,
not.
yeah, kiss her on the lips all the time. Right? Not saying that that's particularly creepy, but what I'm saying, if you add all these things up a little bit,
A
but
grown man, that's creepy.
you add all these things up, right? He is a son husband to his mom, right? He
Wow.
pet he there's you look up to your parents, that's
Right.
normal, but it's a difference between looking up to your parents and pedestalizing them, right? It's a different measure. And
Right.
so he feels a certain obligation, and that's an extreme level talking about Kevin Durant because he's
Yeah.
famous and wealthy, but you can look at um a lot of other guys where I'm not sure if you've ever seen a guy where he's a mama's boy, right? His mom calls, he runs to her.
Mm-hmm.
And you see his mom is like making him do unreasonable things, give her money, buy this,
Mm-hmm.
using guilt. He falls for it. And it repeats that cycle. He's the son husband, right? His mom is toxic. He don't even see that.
Doesn't even see it.
And he plays that particular role. And so basically he's fulfilling everything that she wants, and she doesn't have to sacrifice for any particular relationship. And a lot of these guys become their mom's retirement plan too, right? Because when mom spends all her money, quits her job, does X,
Yep.
Y, and Z, what does she do? She runs to her son husband.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta help my mom move in here with me. See what I'm saying?
That is so crazy, because even with like the son, like the NBA father, the NFL, the son that grows up and does and comes in and has a great job, and the first thing that he wants to do is take care of his mother. At that point, she really should not need him to buy her a house. Her husband should have already taken care of that role.
Exactly.
So I mean, this makes so much sense to me. Like, he should not even, she has neglected her own life responsibilities of not providing, not having them in a stable family, to where when he should, that all of that money should be going towards his own family, building his own legacy and his own, making sure his own generation is his own legacy is taken care of. But he has to look backwards to take care of her, because his father, his mother, they did not, for whatever reason, take care of the responsibilities that they were supposed to. Dang, this is really deep. That's wild. I've never thought about that. I've never even heard of son husband, but that explains a lot.
Yeah. And that's one of those concepts that I discovered. And like I said, I didn't discover it. I heard it from other places. But when I take that concept and put it into all the different experiences, all the different things I've been seeing, all the different behaviors, I'm like, that makes perfect sense.
Wow.
The constant need to support me, look after me. And here's part of the other problem, is that because it's taboo to criticize our mothers, right? I criticize my mom a little bit in the book, but I love my mom. We have a we don't have a perfect relationship, but I love my mother no matter what. But because we are supposed to pedestalize Black women and in conjunction Black mothers, we're not able to point out the flaws, right? We're not able to correct the behaviors and all these different things. I always think back to there's a ESPN documentary series called 30 for 30. I don't know if you've ever heard of. There's one particular documentary, it's called Broke. It talks about all these guys who were different in the professional leagues, who had retired. They made tens of millions of dollars and now they're broke, right? But there was one particular guy, I can't remember which guy it was, but he said after he got his first check, his mom came to him with an itemized list. She wanted him to repay her for raising him. Yes.
That's wild.
That's extremely wild. And so, this is a harsh thing to say or to even question, but I question if a lot of these different mothers who behave in this particular way actually love their kids.
Ooh, why do you say that?
That is not a sign of love. To see your child as a cash register is not a sign of love. To see to push them forward. Like, imagine seeing your child, let's say he's a football player. See your child make, all state. You're like, wow, I'm really proud of him, right? Right. That's our normal You want to see them go. Maybe you want to go to the NFL. I want to see you go to the NFL. I want to be happy for you,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's a normal parental response. If my
Mm-hmm.
son was doing whatever, I want to be happy for him.
Of course.
To turn around and say, I want him to make it to the NFL so he can buy me things or give me money. That's not a sign of love. That's selfishness.
Mm.
And so what I'm ultimately talking about is I'm questioning, do some of these parents, do some of these mothers specifically actually love their kids? And are they so selfish that they can't see beyond themselves?
I wouldn't say that they don't love their children. My mother and I have a very interesting relationship because I've always been kind of like the black sheep of the family. I'm like the question asker. Well, why we got to do this way, and why, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a thinker, and so I've always been like this as a kid, and so it's put pressure on my mom because I'm like, no, you can't just say certain things, you can't just do certain things. I got questions,
Yeah.
and as I got older, I questioned some of the some things that happened or were allowed, or you know, just different things that as a mother myself, no, I would never do. I just would never do. And I struggle to understand her mindset. I know she loves me. And I think that what happens is that parents, they love you, but I used to say, when my mother and I first started like battling, when we really started going at it, I was about 19 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And it just I have this thing that I do, like when I'm talking to people sometimes, even people like my mother, I I can take myself out of a situation and look at it objectively as if I'm not the person involved in that situation. It's a weird thing that I do. I don't know. It for me, I think I use it as a way to help me make sure I'm looking at something properly, because you know, if you're involved, you can skew your own. When it's you can skew, you know, how you look at things. And so I try to
Right.
take myself out of this situation, look at it objectively. And I was at 19, I'm doing this, and we're having this conversation, and I'm just looking at her, and I'm like, people are people first. And I've been saying this since I was 19 years old. Regardless of the title, to you, they are mom, sister, father, pastor, teacher, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But they were Susie before you ever came along. And Susie came with her own issues, her own baggage, her own hangups, her own habits, her own, you know, all of life.
Mm-hmm.
And you came into all of that, but there's still that person who has or has not dealt with those issues. They just happen to be your mama too. So it's
Not
like
into that.
people are people first, and then they become the title person in your life. And it's like, we hold mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, husbands, wives to the title. We
Yeah.
want you to, you know, fit into this title. And when you deviate from what we think that title should be, we're like, and it could be, you could be making a fair assessment. It could be right. But it's like, I do think that parents love you. It's just that a lot of times they haven't healed from their own other stuff, and they are loving you the best way they know how to love you because of whatever they have gone through. And so, because I was strong, you know, I understand what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think it's a lack of love. For the most part, I think I know my mother loves me. And if I shared what I'm talking about, like, people would really question her love for me. But I know she loves me. Um, it it's this is gonna sound kind of weird, but honestly, her behavior to me kind of has nothing to do with me. It's her own issues and struggles that she never dealt with.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to, when you're in it though, it certainly feels like it's not, it doesn't feel like love, because that's not what love should feel like. It doesn't, it very much is selfish. It very much is XYZ. So I hear you, but I think most parents do love their kids even when they make some really ugly, bad choices.
I hear everything that you're saying. And I guess part of me is like I've become this 100% accountability type of person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have my issues, from my childhood.
Right.
I put in the work to try and become a better person. I'm always
Yep.
trying to become a better person. And so when I see someone, I kind of see it like this, and it's a unfair thing to say, but it's a way of saying it because I want people to do better. When you become an adult, like, all right, your childhood is almost like your starting point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of us are fortunate to have good parents, some of us have no parents, right? But that's our starting point.
Yeah.
And right or wrong, when you become an adult, it's your race, right? It's
True.
either you're going to catch up with everybody else or you're going to lag behind, right? But that's life. It's unfair that you start off 5 steps behind everybody else,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't mean that you can't win the race.
Right.
So it depends on how strong, how much are you able to overcome, or how much are you willing to overcome those things setting you back.
Yeah.
And so that's how I see myself. And so I am empathetic. I understand, like you said, I understand, situation with my mom and her upbringing and everything.
Mm-hmm.
However, it kind of ends there, right? I can't let that be the excuse.
Mm.
Like, I know I have certain things that I'm trying to work on. And if I react in a negative way, I can't say, well, it's because my father wasn't in my life. Like,
Right.
I can't let that be the excuse maker for everything that I'm doing that's wrong.
That's
I
right.
I'm now an adult, right?
Mm-hmm.
Since the age of 18, I've been an adult. So I need to take responsibility for my negative behavior and be
Mm-hmm.
accountable for it. So that's why, like, I have a hard time when people want to say, like, oh, this person got locked up, oh, do you see their childhood, blah 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 blah. It's like,
Right.
yeah, but you know what, there's a bunch of people who had bad childhoods just like them and they didn't do what they did.
That's
And you
right.
know what, unfortunately, that's life. Like, you have no control of which womb you pop out of, right?
Yeah.
So this is the life you're in, and
Mm-hmm.
now it's up to you to catch up with everybody else or lag behind. It's your
Right.
choice. That is freedom. Freedom is responsibility.
That's right. That is exactly that's exactly what I was thinking. That's freedom.
Yeah.
Freedom is responsibility. And I think it was Shelby Steele, I want to
Mhm.
say, who talked about, he was the first person that I ever heard talk about how he didn't think that Black Americans were, that when they came out of slavery, that they really understood what freedom meant. And they didn't, probably not when they came out of slavery, probably the 100 years after that, when things kind of started to normalize and Black people were doing, increasing phenomenally, honestly, like the,
Mhm.
the leaps and bounds that we were making were incredible. And things slowly, civil rights was starting to come and, all these things. And we didn't, if you look back, it was almost, I understand why he says that, because it was like, once we really got a taste of the freedom, we didn't it's like we understood one aspect of it, of being able to do what you want to do, but that other part of the responsibility part and the accountability part, it was like we didn't all the way make that connection, because I think we would have rejected like affirmative action. I think we would have rejected um certain things, these hyper welfare programs. I think we would have rejected those things if we really more so internalized responsibility and accountability.
I don't know about that,
Okay.
to be honest with you. I think a lot of times when we talk about the history of Black Americans, part of me feels like we skip basically the 1900s up until 1960, right?
Mm-hmm.
We once in a while we highlight, like, oh, we were married more so than
Right.
pre 1960s.
Yeah.
But outside of that, we don't really talk about that particular era. There was, Thomas Sowell talks about the growth that
Yeah.
Black Americans were having to go from, people not being able. Well, obviously, not every Black person was enslaved, but
Right.
a population of people which in their demographic were enslaved were not allowed to be to read or write, so
Right.
they're illiterate. To in a matter, I think it was a matter of 40 years.
40 years cut in half. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a tremendous leap.
Mm-hmm.
Just from a literacy level,
Mm-hmm.
you had inventors, you had all different types of accomplishments,
Millionaires.
you had all types of things happening,
Mm-hmm.
even in the South. Even though economically in the South things weren't the greatest, they still had family, right?
Right.
They still had values. They were highly religious.
Mm-hmm.
There was a sense of moral code, not just with Black Americans, but it seemed to be somewhat in general,
Yeah.
right? Obviously, not every, there are Christians who do bad things,
Right.
but what I'm ultimately saying is that I feel like we skip that period to make some leap towards slavery, because that's what it always goes
Oh
back
yeah.
to.
Oh,
You know,
I totally feel it. Yeah, absolutely.
right?
It's like,
So,
yeah,
so
nobody wants
we
to talk about the success.
right. So it's kind of like, oh, you see how we're locked up today? That's
Mhm.
because of slavery. And
Yes.
then when you go and look at the numbers, um, you know, I think the numbers I looked at were in the 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
We were locked up at a rate that was pretty much equivalent to our population, right? So you're telling me at a time period where there was legal segregation, there was
Mm-hmm.
legal oppression, that we weren't overly arrested? You don't
Right.
say.
Okay. Yes, I see what you're saying. I'm sorry. I follow now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and
Right.
it's because also during that time period, what people don't want to talk about is, yeah, because a lot of us weren't educated. Guess what? We were cheap labor,
Mm-hmm.
and
That's right.
people liked using our labor.
That's right.
So we weren't. We might have been discriminated, yes, absolutely, but
Mm-hmm.
we were finding ways around it to have some sort of economic uh, success, or
Right.
climbing towards economic success without
Yes.
anybody else. you know
You keep talking about stuff that you're not supposed to talk about, Adam. You don't know. I don't know why you keep doing
yeah,
that.
it's just annoying. There's a convenience to go towards slavery, and it's incredibly annoying. It's disingenuous when I see it,
Yeah.
because they completely skip, I don't know, 60, 70 years,
Mm-hmm.
just to leap towards slavery, to make some association towards today, right? It's, to me, it's like saying Hitler had a dog too. It's
Right.
that
Right.
it's
Right.
that way. Oh, okay, so that then this person must be Hitler, right?
Right.
It-
Well,
it's
okay, let me
mhm,
so what I hear too is when you bring up being locked up,
yeah.
they'll say, "Well, why do you always bring up that? The majority of black people aren't locked up," which is true. The majority of black people are not locked up. The majority of black people are middle class. The majority of black people are not thugs, gangsters. The majority of black people are just like every other American.
hmm
So, what do you say when you're talking about like crime is a problem? Okay, like in Black America, crime is a problem. But when you say these things in certain circles, it's like, well, why do you always have to bring that up? Because the majority of Black people are not doing that. What do you say to that?
Well, the majority of the victims of those criminals are Black. Does that matter? So I have a chapter where I'm talking about, you know, the way we immediately go towards idealizing the terrorists simply because they died in the hands of somebody else, right? Ignoring that they've been terrorizing their own community. Shoot, what's his name? The guy who was shot by the police at the Wendy's in Atlanta. His name
Oh,
is
I
it
forget his
Brooks?
name. Oh God, don't I forget.
Yeah,
But I know
but
who you're talking
you
about.
know what I'm talking about.
He was drunk in the car, and he ended up tussling with the cops and shot. Well, he got shot. He yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly my point. He was drunk in his car, right? So what if he was driving and he killed somebody,
Mm.
right? And he was already, I believe, he was on probation, right?
Yes, I believe so.
So this is a guy with a criminal history, and not just tickets, a criminal history. He's been locked up before,
Hmm.
who's out drunk driving, and he could have killed somebody.
Yeah.
And thankfully, he fell asleep in a drive-through instead of falling asleep on the highway or falling
Right.
asleep driving down the street,
Hmm.
and could have seriously hurt somebody. You know,
Hmm.
it's that part that we seem to ignore, just for the convenience to find some way of saying that people are wrongly treated, and all this
Hmm.
other stuff. And I seriously question, why is it okay to aim for, like, for example, bail reform? Why are we
Hmm.
putting so much effort into bail reform, but no one cares when these people get out and they hurt somebody, the same
Right.
demographic of people that you say that you care so much about?
Right.
And
It makes no sense.
and while I understand when they say, well, why do you even bring this up? Actually, we're not even the ones who bring up crime all the time, right? Or not crime, imprisonment.
Hmm.
And that's the interesting part. There's a certain demographic that brings up imprisonment to make a point of being oppressed because we're disproportionately high in prisons, right?
Right.
But then there's the other sect that brings up crime
Hmm.
because people are being victimized by criminals.
Right.
So there's the two sides. If we say that we shouldn't talk about the criminals, being imprisoned, then we're being looked at like we're ignoring a problem.
Yeah.
If we say that crime is too high, then we're looking at like we're chastising, or we're only highlighting certain things. The fact of the matter is, this always goes back to the taboo phrase of black and black crime, but ultimately we should just call it black victims, right? Legit victims.
Yeah.
Do these people matter
Right.
in these particular communities who are being affected? It really doesn't take that many people to destroy a neighborhood.
Right.
Imagine a neighborhood with 1,000 people,
Yeah.
right? One crazy person. Would that destroy a neighborhood? Maybe not.
Hmm.
10? Possibly.
Yeah.
50? Oh yeah, for sure. Right? It
Hmm.
doesn't take that many people. It
Mm.
doesn't take that many people to feel unsafe to go outside, to
Yeah.
feel like there's terror around the corner. So,
Mm.
when we're looking at crime and we're looking at how this impacts real people, real working class people,
Yeah.
in these particular black neighborhoods, they're unsafe. And then when the reflex is, well, they're being over policed, there is, like, for example, New York City. And I'm not the biggest fan of New York City,
Hmm.
but my God, the statistics show that the police are in the locations where there's the highest violence of crime.
Right.
It just happens to be in black neighborhoods that
Yeah.
there's the
Right.
highest violence. Like,
Oh, wait, Adam, there you go saying this stuff again. But don't you know that white people, that other races commit crime at the same, oh, no, no, no. Crime is proximity. So there's not, I'm trying to say it how they say it. There is not, it's not like, black people are committing crime more. It's just all races commit crime closest to each other.
that is
So,
true. So, and here's the other thing that people don't realize. I believe the statistic is, I think it's like 62 or 63% of Black Americans live in 10 states.
oh wow.
So
Okay.
we're in very particular states. If you started naming cities that are
Yeah.
Black dominated, you're naming the 10 states,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So we are in very particular areas, generally urban areas, highly populated, condensed areas,
Right.
right? And we are a racial minority, so we are congested towards each other
Mhm.
in very specific areas, which means in big cities they have more police, they have more police enforcement, you
Right.
have more people who are on top of each other. for white Americans or any other demographic, really, they don't live that close to each other. They live in rural areas where it's more spread out. They live
Mm,
in suburban areas that are more spread out, right? So there's a difference as far as city police enforcement versus rural police enforcement. Trust me,
yeah.
white people do their crazy stuff too. There's meth
Hmm.
heads that go around and steal cars and shoot at cops and do all types of crazy stuff too.
Yeah.
The difference is enforcement looks different because things are so spread out. And
And
yeah.
really quick, this is something that I noticed too. Not only does enforcement look different, the way this is it's kind of funny to me.
Mhm.
The way black people do drugs and sell drugs is totally different. Okay, so I went to predominantly white high school, right? Were they doing drugs? Absolutely. We had a smoking area in Connecticut in high school, and kids used to be out there smoking weed.
Mhm.
But the way that they did their drugs and sold their drugs was totally different. So typically, the kid would come over with his backpack, all right? And he's like, "Hi, Mrs. So and so." And she's like, "Hi, Johnny. Tommy's down in the basement." So he goes with his backpack and he goes down there and they're doing they doing what they do. In the hood or in predominantly black neighborhoods, you're on the corner. You're outside smoking weed. You're outside selling your whatever you're selling. It
Mhm.
is totally the way black people sell dope and the way white people, it's like, what do you want the cop to do? You're out, like you're on the block, like he sees you, sir. Like, yeah, he can't arrest little Johnny who came in with his backpack, came in, sat for 20 minutes, dropped off whatever he was going to drop off and bounced. Like, the way it looks is totally different. It's
Yeah.
like, I don't know. I really, like, I was talking to, like, years ago, I was having this conversation. I'm like, it's not even the same in way how they sell drugs. It's just totally different.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can also add in the fact, gangs. Obviously there are gangs all over the place, but it looks different,
Yeah.
right? Um, and you know, if you're going from a psychological standpoint, what are because gangs are mostly men
Mhm.
or young boys. What are they looking for? Right? They're looking for
Belonging,
acceptance. They're like
fathers.
Right. They're looking for direction, influence, protection.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
That's another thing that people take for granted when it comes to fathers within the home, a sense of protection. You used to hear the old stories of they got into something with some kid from down the block. What did they do? They came home to their dad
Mm,
to help to resolve the issue. Right.
right.
So, but what if that guy is not there? Where is your sense of protection? You
Right.
know, and and so that's the dangerous avenue that a lot of young men fall down towards, not even just black men but just men in general,
Right.
when there's no sense of direction. And I use the phrase in my book that fathers are like your compass.
Hmm.
They're like your purpose compass, right?
Yeah.
They help to guide you in the particular direction so it leads you towards success. And
Hmm.
that's what I do with my son. My son wants to do animation, so I'm helping to guide him towards that path and encourage him,
Yeah.
right? But what if I wasn't here, right? Would he try this and try this and go here, then he's just
Right.
disoriented, right?
Right.
As far as life, and I'm helping him to focus,
Mm,
right? He finds some girl that he might like, and I say that's cool and everything, but focus on your path, right?
right.
And that's what a healthy father figure is supposed to do. It's supposed to consistently keep their children on a particular path and set an example. But what if that's gone and you have a bunch of aimless boys and girls just wandering around, girls procreating with whoever they just, it's like the shiny thing that
Right.
looks cute. And then,
Right.
10 years later, they regret doing so because they had kids with a guy they shouldn't have had
Right.
kids with, right? We used to consult our family before moving forward in the family making process, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's some people say like the only two honest men that you'll ever meet um, are your brothers or your fathers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because neither are trying to sleep with you.
Right. True. Yeah.
And so imagine you grow up and your father isn't around, and so all right, so what's your value of men just in general, right? Oh, they're
Mm-hmm.
just these cute things, and once in a while you have some fun with them, right?
Right.
But you miss out on the great advice that men can give,
Right.
the setting of example for men, the sense of protection,
Yeah.
the sense of service that men provide. You miss out on all these things, and so you have no idea what to pick
Yeah.
as far as your family moving forward.
Yeah.
And you look at men as optional. That's another unfortunate circumstance. But imagine how many relationships how many like bad relationships, how many bad family planning situations, families being born out of craziness
Mm-hmm.
could have been avoided if they could have brought that guy to their father and said,
Mm-hmm.
"What do you think of him? That guy's a bum. That guy's no
Right.
good.
Yep.
Listen, I know you like him, but,"
Yep.
and second guess,
Mm-hmm.
because you're in that mindset like, "Oh, I really
Mm-hmm.
like him.
Yep.
He's been dangling that carrot." And
Yep.
but
But daddy's voice,
yeah.
all daddy has to do is put that little seed of doubt in your mind. You might not listen like right at that moment, but it's gonna be there.
Hmm.
And it's so funny. My daughter talked about, my oldest daughter talked about this today. Her father and I were not married anymore, but he's still very much involved in their lives.
Hmm.
And she was so we were talking about how girls now, because of all the trans stuff, like girls today are talking about like, oh my god, how do I make sure that I'm marrying a biological man? No, that it's crazy that kids have to like think about this, but these are things that they are talking about.
Yeah.
They are like, okay, let me make sure. And my daughter said, she was like, um I feel like my dad would probably like be able to tell, like daddy, he would know. And I was like, that's right. Your dad,
Mhm.
he's going to know. He's going to know. He's going to be able to pick that up probably faster than I would, faster than, she would certainly, you know, or at least have her, like, I don't know, something about this situation ain't, something in the buttermilk ain't clean. You need to be careful with that.
Yeah.
But fathers are so important
Yeah.
for all of these little milestones in life, all of these situations. Even now, like my father passed away in 2019.
Mhm.
I go through some stuff and I'm like, God, I wish I could call my dad. Like, it is, losing a parent is really, really tough, especially when you're like, you have a good relationship with them.
Yeah.
And we didn't always have a good relationship, but I'm blessed to the last 12 years or so, like we really, really had a close relationship.
That's great.
And so we were close when I was little. When my parents got divorced, we went, it was tough for me because I was daddy's little girl. Like that was hard. And then we were able to reconcile our relationship. But there are just some things where you just need to hear what daddy has to say. You're like,
Yeah.
mama won't do. I
Yeah.
remember my dad telling me when I was little, he was like, nobody owes you anything. In life, you're going to have to work for everything that you get. That always stuck with me. He always told us that nobody owes you anything.
Hmm.
You're going to have to work hard for everything that you get. And, I am positive that is why I am a grinder. Like I work, I push hard. I'm probably a little bit too hard on myself sometimes, but I'm one of those kind of people that when I feel like I want something, like I'm gonna go hard. Because it's like I can hear that voice is just always there. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I always hear that. But you're right. It's like dads, man. Like my mom, bless her heart, but she never, she didn't tell that to me like that in that way that really, frame this thing. Well, look, let me tell you what this thing is really about. You're gonna have to go out and get it out the mud because ain't nobody gonna give you nothing.
Yeah.
Like only a way. He told me in a way that only a father could tell you. You know what I mean? And it
Yeah.
sticks with you differently. It registers differently. Because mom is like, well, darling, you gotta work hard. It's a
Hmm.
whole different, the message is the same, but the way it's delivered is different.
Yeah.
All of these things. I don't know. It's just it's nothing like a dad. It's nothing like it.
Yeah. I mean,
So
we're fundamentally different.
yes.
You know, from a natural standpoint, women are supposed to be nurturers, and the
Mm-hmm.
fathers are supposed to be the protectors, the truth tellers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or someone who's supposed to prepare you for life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, to give an anecdote, you bump your knee, your mom comes over and says, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" And the
Yeah.
father's supposed to say, "You'll be fine."
Right. Oh,
Right.
let me look. Okay, you're good. You'll be good.
Right. Right. And so I don't want anybody to misunderstand. I'm talking a lot about fathers and the importance of fathers, but if there was a breakout of single fathers, right, in the opposite direction, I would say we need mothers, right,
Right.
because we need a balance between the two.
There you go.
And
Absolutely.
it's incredibly important to have the balance between the two. And actually, I just wanted to bring up one thing because you mentioned something earlier
Sure.
about like people's rebuttals as far as Black fathers are involved with their kids, right?
Yeah.
What they mean is, and I'll point to myself because I had my son out of wedlock,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm trying to do everything I can to make up for that.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about, seeing your kids on the weekends and all this other
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But you know what that is? And I'm saying this for myself. That's bare minimum.
Mm-hmm.
And to say, oh, well, they're involved, that it's that word involved. They
Uh-huh.
see their kids. No, what I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about is the status quo for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
The status quo is in the house, not
That's right.
involved. There's no volved. It's just in.
In.
It's in the house.
Yeah.
And there is this level of not even mediocrity. It's just bare minimum parental involvement,
Mm-hmm.
right? When it comes to fathers in the house for Black Americans, and I can't fully understand why we are accepting that, right? Why we are denying the statistic just to say point at another statistic as far as the involvement, just to
Mm-hmm.
not feel bad about the truth. The truth is that children are born in single parent homes,
Yeah.
meaning they're not married. The father and the mother are not living together,
Yeah.
right? And so this is a problem,
It is a
right? it,
problem.
it
That's
doesn't
right.
matter if the father, all right, like I'll give you an example. People want to talk about economics, with economic disparities, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the numbers exactly, so I'm going to butcher it if I try, but let's say it's nearly half
Mm-hmm.
as far as the average household income to whites, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or let's say not even half. Let's say it's a quarter higher for white Americans because it's probably
Mm-hmm.
not half. So if let's say 30% of white Americans have single parent homes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And 70% of Black Americans grow up in single parent homes, right? So that means that there's two people who are now paying two rents or two mortgages in two separate households, right? Imagine,
Yeah.
I don't know, let's do a math equation. What if we took those two and put them together? Maybe
Hello.
the average and household income would climb. I don't know.
Right. I
Possibly.
have been saying this. This seems like so common sense to me. I literally said this, I don't know, a week ago to somebody. I'm like, people always like to talk about the disparities in Black, household. First of all, households look total. I am a single mother with two children. My neighbor is married with three kids. Her household looks totally different from mine.
Mhm.
So we lump all these things together. That's number one. We lump them together that should not be lumped together. Number two is, if it's not the most blatantly, 2 + 2 is 4 scenario, I don't know what is. If you have a 2-parent home and one makes 50,000, both make $50,000, that is now $100,000 household income. If you
Mhm.
got a single parent home and she makes $50,000 and the father of those children makes $50,000, you make the same things. You're just not, like you just said, you're just not in the same home. I don't know, but that's the situation with a lot of Black folk. The
Yeah.
disparity is really not that great as what we try to make it seem. It's really not, because it's the 1% that's getting all, they get into the money. Okay, and we want to, they're the ones that's making all this money. It's not just like white, but it's a lot of broke white people too, or a lot of
Yeah.
just regular middle class white people. They just typically have 2 people in their homes. So the financial burden is not on one person. This is like not rocket science here. This is simple. Anyway, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I had to go on a tangent for that, because that I have been saying that forever.
Yeah. And oh man, I really wish I could remember the numbers, but there was a particular study that came out to show what's the uh, not the income, but what's the worth, right? Like how much
Oh,
how much of the value of a particular household
yeah.
in certain situations. Single mothers are overwhelmingly poor,
Mm-hmm.
right? They might be living check to check, and because of that they have no value. They're generally not homeowners. it's
Mm-hmm.
it's rare that it happens. They're
Yep.
generally not high income earners. It's
Mm-hmm.
rare that it happens. And there's like this Wonder Woman idea that you can have a bunch of kids and live your best life and travel abroad and yeah, I'm just like, who are these who are
They
these
don't
people that is
exist. That
they
is
don't
for
exist.
Instagram only. Okay. That does not exist. It's another one of these fantasy. You're not in reality. You are
Right.
not in reality. That is not what your life will look like. That is not what that is not that is not what single mothers' lives look like. Literally everything you make goes towards your children, because it's just you by yourself.
Unless you have a lot of debt, which a lot of them do.
Yeah, true.
So they have a negative value, right? And then remember what I said, the son husband who's taking care
Mm.
of the mom, the son husband's taking care of mom. Why? Because she has no retirement.
Uh, a lot of people talk about Kevin
Kevin,
Samuels.
yeah.
I love Kevin Samuels. I think he spills it because he talks about, what are you going to do when you're 65? He goes there. When you are 65 and you done spent your whole life looking for Mr. 6-figure Mercedes, check, all these boxes, when most Black men make, 50, $60,000 a year.
Hmm. Actually,
So that,
less. It's
yeah,
average is 40, I believe.
okay. Well, they're not 6-figure earners,
Hmm.
and you sitting on waiting for the Superman to come and take care of you and all your childrens.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do when retirement comes? You're not going to have enough money you don't even have enough money for your life insurance, or many times you don't even plan for life insurance. You're not even thinking about that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, people need a reality check. I am so sick of these conversations where we can't talk about these real problems, because it's like we don't want everybody to know our dirty laundry. Well, shoot, the secret is out.
Yeah.
Everybody can see. This is a mess. And I'm not trying to be hard on Black people, but it's like, when it comes to crime, when it
Hmm.
comes to finances, and just to stick with crime for a crime for a second, when somebody is shot dead, that is a destiny ended. We are so jaded by these stories now, that we're just like, oh, we just gonna go and mark. It's like somebody died, a kid, typically it's a child,
Hmm.
that will never be, they don't even have the opportunity to be a father, a leader, a And, their destiny is ended. And we are talking about these things as if, like, oh, well, you just didn't put your socks away properly. Like, we talk about it so nonchalantly that, it disturbs me that we look at death and murder so cavalier. It's just, I don't want to hear about, well, I don't want to hear the majority of Black people aren't doing that. I really, like, when it comes to death and, some of these topics, I feel like we're not taking it seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think there is, I think it depends. The people who are the closest to the death do take it seriously.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
The people who are trying to, like the people who are watching from a distance, who are looking for something to be outraged, ignore that body, ignore that body, ignore that body.
Ugh.
Yeah. They listen. Not everybody needs to be some sort of crusader for Black people. I don't see myself as that. I wanted to talk about very specific things, and not even necessarily about Black people per se. It's about the mentality. It's about the ideology.
Yeah.
It's about the behavior and the concepts, right? Because I understand that being, single parents is not in our blood. It's not, it's not innate. Being violent is not a Black issue.
Right.
These are certain things. These are behavioral patterns, and they've been wrapped up in our culture.
Yes.
Right. And so what I'm trying to do is address the culture part. Why is this normalized? Why are we crying? And I hate to do this, but like the George Floyd situation, I have to say this. No one is saying that he deserved to die. But why are we more outraged at a guy who legit terrorized his own neighborhood, who didn't care enough about his body to not feed himself full of poison with drug addiction?
Yeah.
And that sounds harsh because there are people who are addicted to drugs and everything, and they have to work to get clean.
Yeah.
But he did not do those things.
Right.
And so when you have this person and you're so outraged because of this one person, but there are thousands of people who die needlessly, right? Who die unnecessarily. I really wish people would look up what is the likeliness of death for Black Americans between the age of 18 and 40, and then compare it to other demographics. What are the reasons behind it? It's homicide.
It's a preventable death.
It's a preventable death. Yes. And so like that should tell you something. That should tell you that there is a problem. Yeah. So, I really wish people would understand the level of outrage is completely mismanaged. Right. The round the clock coverage, the gold casket, the US tour.
Ciao. I was over it.
And I'm like, all right, listen, no one's saying that this man deserves to die or anything, but like, man, this seems way out of proportion.
Yeah.
Right. And then that's why, like in my one chapter, the was it the Black elite, shoot, I can't remember my own chapters. It's been that while since I've read it. But I'm basically talking about the Black elite who, I'm sorry, Ivory Tower Black elites. That's what it's called. Okay. Right. The people who reign up top, who look down and say, oh, we have the same problems. Right. They're quick to make this Black association when it's convenient, right? When the rest of the masses are having a particular issue, and then they use that to benefit themselves.
Right.
So like recently, the issue with Brian Flores, right? Now all of a sudden he's Rosa Parks, like literally saying that he is the Rosa Parks. And I was watching.
Wait, Brian Flores?
Yeah, the head coach who's now, former head coach who's suing the NFL.
Oh, okay. I haven't quite read the story yet. So
I
I wasn't, I heard about the coach, but I didn't know his name. So okay, I'm sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
but a guy basically who's been economically doing pretty well. When he was a
Hmm.
head coach, he's making $3 million a year.
Hmm.
I think he'll be fine.
Yeah.
And he would have likely, if he didn't attempt to sue the NFL, he probably would have found some coordinator job somewhere.
Hmm.
Not maybe not making $3 million a year, but he
Right.
would have been fine, right?
Yeah.
Now, because he didn't get the jobs that he wanted, he found some way to try and say, well, there's a problem. Why? Because there's disparities. There's not enough black head coaches, right? There's racism is being used by the economic elite, the
Hmm.
economically privileged people. They're using that to leverage the masses to be outraged
Yep.
and to sort some sort of change. You
Yeah.
can see that, and this is, I'm not saying that this is right or wrong, but you can see that with the Clippers, right?
Hmm.
The audio clips came out from his mistress. The players were upset, but what did that really mean? They wanted the owner out. They can't force him to sell, right?
Mm.
They can't force him to sell. They wanted to put enough pressure on him where he felt like he had no choice but to sell,
Mm.
and he was able to sell the business, right? But that is a huge deal. A billionaire being forced to sell his business or sell his franchise, right? And they're trying to do that again. There's head
So wait, what
coaches.
was his? Why
Mhm.
did they want him to do this? The
Wh- uh,
Clippers.
f- oh, because I don't know if you remember, this was years ago. Um, his mistress had recorded him. It sounds funny to say. His mistress, his half black mistress, I think she's half black mistress,
Uh-huh.
recorded him saying that he was upset that she was sitting next to Magic Johnson,
Hmm.
um, because image wise, he didn't want his girl. I think he was trying to imply he didn't want his girl be hanging out with all these black guys,
Yeah.
right? I got an image here. As he's saying this to his mistress. Um,
Okay. I didn't hear
so
about this.
oh yeah, it was a whole big thing. But
Okay.
because of all that, it gave the impression that this guy's a racist. He may be, I probably is a racist. I don't know,
Right.
but that's not the point. The point is that they were able to use the situation to force him and put him under pressure to sell $1 billion franchise.
Ooh-wee. Wow.
So what I'm saying is racism, and just keep an eye on this. When you start seeing people who are up here using
Hmm.
racism
Hmm.
as a ploy, as a leverage, they're doing that because they know it works. The
Yes,
NFL
they're
is screwed
cashing
over.
in.
They're
They're
cashing in.
cashing in on the trend. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, just call it racist, and you can basically stick them up and get whatever you want. It's like a
And
gun.
and and then ESPN will cry. All their black former players will
Yep.
cry about, in this day and age, there needs to be more head coaches, and they'll go through all
Punks.
that. Yeah, but they're doing that for a particular reason.
Yep.
They want the Dolphins to sell their team. I'm telling you, they're
You know what? This is now I'm about to say something real kind of. I wish white folks would just say, you know what? I ain't doing you ain't gonna intimidate me to do nothing. You want to call me a white supremacist? I'm gonna show you what a white supremacist do. Now I ain't doing blank.
yeah.
I'm not I don't want to hear it. I wish more of them, but they get so like, oh my god, it's like, well, if y'all the so supreme, why you ain't acting like it?
I
It's
really
that
wish more.
black people ain't ready for white folks to like really take up the mantle of being the white supremacists that you've been calling them.
Yeah, yo, seriously. I'm
So
worried
funny.
about that being a thing that starts to happen where
Yeah, I
people
thought
just
about
say, you
that.
know
Yeah.
what, if you're gonna call me that. But thankfully that's not what's happening. I think
Yeah.
people are realizing that it's a extreme minority of people who are on the activist level who feel the need to say all these things,
Yeah.
which is why like I tend not to even pay attention to these people.
Hmm.
They don't really matter to. Here's the funny part about like black supremacists. black supremacists
Ooh,
and white.
black supremacists. Adam, now you know you can't say that.
Oh, well, I mean, they are black.
They are. It's true.
Yeah.
They are there.
But the funny thing about black supremacists is that they pretty much believe in the same things as white supremacists.
Yes,
And
100%.
the reason why people are concerned about white supremacists is because, like, I'm talking about on the extreme level, like actually like neo-Nazis and stuff like that, is that they are more likely to be violent, right? Whereas the black supremacists are less violent.
Mm.
You know, they're just complainers, to be
Yeah,
honest with you.
true.
And what's funny about black supremacists, as much as they talk about, you know, black being the greatest and best and that's right,
Yeah.
it always comes down to what somebody needs to do for them.
Right. I never understood this. We got all this black girl magic. We got all this, you know, black boy joy, which is, I don't know, that's some weird stuff there. And you got all of this, black excellence and blackly black, and black is so great. It's like, okay, well then why in the world are you constantly begging the government for money? Why? You're so great. Go get it. Go. Like you're a Kang and a Quang. We Quangs and Kangs. Like, well, do what kings and queens do then. Okay.
Yeah.
I've never seen a king or a queen beg for somebody else to give them anything.
It's a completely weird, like, it's a illogical, it just like most extreme ideologies, when you start asking questions, it doesn't make a lot of sense as to how they're processing this information. How if this is right, then why is this right? If this is wrong, then why is this wrong? Like, you're trying to process how they're coming to these particular conclusions. And, you know, I remember, like, when I started becoming active on Twitter, one of my tweets was basically saying, so you're not black if you don't want people to give you handouts, but you're pro-black if you want people to give you handouts.
Ooh,
Like,
wait a minute. Okay, so you're not black if you don't want. Okay, right? Because those are like typically the conservatives or whatever.
Like,
but
if I'm saying you can do it, you can build your own wealth. You can, encouraging people to do for themselves. That's not black, but it's pro-black to say that it's someone else's fault and they need to give you stuff for, because you just exist. That's essentially
exist.
Yeah. That's essentially,
and you got a high count of melanin.
Yeah. Or because of someone else's legit trauma, like,
wow, that's true. And so it's like it's a lose-lose situation, because it's like, that's why putting so much emphasis on the skin color is so ridiculous, because you end up in like this loop. Because if you're saying, no, I think I have enough merit, I can get it on my own. Oh, you're not black enough. And then if you're saying like, oh, I'm pro-black, so we're going to demand this from the government. It's like, but it's still back to this, your blackness. It's still back to the same thing, whether you're, you have your black meter, your blackness meter, and if you, depending on what you're saying or doing, your blackness can, it can shrink or grow. It's absurd. So to wrap this up, like, what advice would you give a young boy who's growing up, maybe without a father, and going through some of the same struggles that you went through? How does he get to where you are, like, mentally? How do you get over that hump?
Believe in yourself and find a male mentor. Those are probably the two biggest things. I didn't have any male influences in my life. We moved around a lot. I didn't really have any mentors until I became an adult. And I didn't really believe in myself, right? And struggled with that. I would say this is within the past, 3, 4, 5 years has been the most I've really truly believed in myself and what I'm capable of doing. And it's only been getting getting bigger and bigger. And even just writing this book, the level of encouragement from people, sitting down here and talking to you, I
Mhm.
never imagined this from just saying, I'm going to do this, right? And hearing
Mm.
people feel touched by the book and really understand what I'm trying to say, gives me even more encouragement and the unsolicited encouragement that people give and the true
Yeah.
belief in me. I didn't have that. Some people have that when they grow up.
True.
They do great things as a kid. People give them affirmation. I didn't
Yeah.
have that, so it's different. I'm sometimes I'm uncomfortable when it comes to compliments, and that's partly
Mm.
because I wasn't used to that. I appreciate it, but I'm just not used to it. And
Yeah.
maybe that helps to keep me humble. But you know, I'm still appreciative of all these different things. But to
Yeah.
answer your question, uh, for that boy that's out there, believe in yourself, right? It always seems like it's impossible at that moment, but if you go through the struggle, it only shows how much strength you have within you.
Mm.
And all those difficult moments that I had in my life, I don't look at it as like sadness. I always look at it like I was able to overcome those things.
Mm.
Homelessness, I was able to overcome it. My car being repossessed, I was able to overcome it.
Mhm.
Having to move back home, I was able to overcome it. I was able
Mhm.
to overcome all these different things to
Mhm.
become the person I am today. And that's ultimately what I'm advocating for people to do, whether it's Black Americans or anybody else.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a victim unless you
Right.
want to be.
Mm. You don't have to be a victim unless you want to be.
Hmm.
That is that's it. You don't have to be you have a choice. You have a choice
Yeah.
and you have control over that choice. You don't have to be a victim unless you want to be.
Yeah.
That's right. You have a choice. And even if you go through something bad, just like, you had to go through these struggles, you can choose to live in the trauma of the struggle.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have a
I've
choice.
I've met people who've been through legit traumas. I
Mhm.
met a woman once who was raped, and she turned that situation into advocating for women and who went through a similar situation, and it's become gratifying for her to do so. She
Yeah.
was able to turn that trauma into something beneficial for
Yeah.
other people, and she doesn't see herself as a victim. She sees
Right.
herself as a survivor, right? And these are particular mindsets, and that's ultimately what I'm addressing.
Yeah.
So the
I have to say
yeah.
this. When I was a kid, my mom used to listen to Mary. You ever heard of Mary Kay? Like the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So she was one of the salespeople or whatever, and she used to listen to these tapes, which were actually very beneficial for us kids because I remember a lot of that. So it was very like inspiring and motivational. But I remember there was this woman she used to listen to all the time, and she was telling a story about another woman, and she said the woman had been raped, but she had, much like the person that you were talking about, she was, she had refused to be a victim, and she was like going and speaking about it, and she was like really doing all these amazing things in the community for other rape victims. And the woman asked her, like, why, where does this come from? And she said something. I had to be about 8 or 9 years old when I heard this, maybe, well, maybe like 10 or 11, but I never forgot it. She said, he had one night of my life. I was not going to let him have another. I was like, wow. As a
Yeah,
kid, that just stuck with me. I was like, yeah, I feel that. You got that one, but you're not going to get the rest.
yeah,
It is certainly, it starts in your mind.
yeah.
So, yeah, wow.
It's a
Thank you
it's a
so
level
much.
of power.
Yeah,
It's a le-
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. That is so true. Gosh, I feel like I could talk to you. I have like the moment I feel like I'm done, like other things pop in my head, but I don't want this to go like too long. We will have to do this again because I really think that this conversation will bless somebody. Hopefully it will bless many people
Mhm.
and change some lives, change some mindsets. So thank you so so much for
My
your
pleasure.
courage of writing the book, of doing that thing that seems hard to do, or that you didn't feel like you had everything to, what it takes to do it, but you did it anyway. And now you're on the other side and you're blowing up.
A
So,
little bit.
well, thank you so much. I was certainly blessed by this conversation. So thanks for being on
Likewise.
the show.
Thank you. I
Can
really
you
appreciate
let
it.
everybody know like where they can find you online and where to get your book and everything?
Yeah. People can go to wrongspeak.net. They can also, you could purchase a signed copy, non-signed copy from there. It's also on Amazon or barnesandnoble.com. You can find me on Twitter at wrong_speak. Yeah, same thing with Wrong Speak Publishing. It's at Wrong Speak Pub on Twitter as well. You find me on Facebook, Instagram. Look for Wrong Speak Adam, and you'll find me. So I'm
All
pretty
right.
much everywhere.
Okay. Good to know. Well, make sure you guys go out and buy that book because it's definitely life transformational. So thank you again, Adam. I look forward to talking to you again.
Likewise. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.